But I became a poster child for equal pay, and I liked that because I couldn't let it go. I first immediately thought about my daughter, and I have a 4-year-old granddaughter, and they'll be coming along. In fact, I'm not sure my daughter will ever reap the benefits of a lot of this, but I believe the granddaughter will. But the media came knocking. The lawyer said, you do not have to respond to them because you can just refer all calls to us. I gave this my best fight. I had nothing to be embarrassed or ashamed of. But when we got to the Supreme Court, they decided, the government's attorney, he got on Goodyear's side. When you go to the Supreme Court, each lawyer gets 30 minutes. My attorney had 20 minutes to argue on my behalf and my case, and then he sat down and Goodyear's attorney argued for 20 minutes and presented their case, and then the United States attorney got up and he had 10 minutes of Goodyear's time. That was sort of a shocker. Now, Equal Employment had supported my case all the way through 11th Circuit. In fact, they wrote a brief and went to 11th Circuit on my behalf. But when we got to the United States Supreme Court, they got on the other side. So you ask yourself, why? Well, May of '07, that verdict came out. But then when the election last year changed the climate and the Congress and the Senate, the House and the Senate, we got the bill passed, and Lilly didn't do it by herself. I'm just honored to have my name on it because Senator Leahy, I had the opportunity to come to speak before his committee, and that was quite an honor. Thank you. But a lot of the groups across the United States joined in. I've just spoke to the NELA, that's the National Employment Lawyers Association in Palm Springs, California, which was mostly men, and they lobbied for the bill. There were a lot of people lobbying for this bill, all women's groups across the country. A lot of individuals made phone calls, and I'm sure there's people in this audience who put the pressure. Of course, you didn't have to pressure this fellow. He voted for it. He was for it. The South didn't do very well. I only had one representative from the state of Alabama who voted for the Ledbetter bill. And I am now supporting him and endorsing him, campaigning for him to be the next governor, the first African-American governor of Alabama. He went to school with a president, but I thought first, as I know you can tell with my southern accent and my southern drawl, that I'm from the South. I had never lived anywhere else. I grew up in rural Alabama, that this was a deep South problem, that the good old white guys was just keeping control. But that's not true. It's a national epidemic, and I've had time to learn it in the airports and all across the country. I've met medical physicians. There's one in the state of New York who had to sue the school where she was teaching because they were paying her 50% of what they were paying the white males. The hospital where she carried her ENT pediatric patients for surgery, they were paying her half what they paid the white doctors. The state of New York settled for over $2 million, and the hospital settled for much more, which she cannot talk about. I have letters at my house from university professors who hold doctorates, and their counterparts do not, but they're paid less. We still have a long way to go, and we do have to have more changes, and we've got to get more women at the top, on boards. You look at the corporations when they release their boards, there'll be maybe one woman. And the same thing with the Supreme Court. And I can tell you that I always took my vote seriously and looked at elections very critically, but I never looked at them like I did in '08. To me, that was the most critical election, because you see, I went to the Supreme Court, and there was Justice Thomas. He's a Southerner. He's definitely a minority. He came up extremely hard, extremely poor. I can't think of a better example of someone who did not live up to what Congress, the House, and the Senate thought he should when he got appointed to the Supreme Court. But I'll have to always be entirely grateful to Justice Ginsburg for her strong voice and that dissent that she read, because she said they didn't understand what it's like in the real world, and that's the person who challenged Congress to change the law back, and that's exactly what they did. I will leave a historical mark thanks to them. I'm told by Congressman Davis that I may be the only Alabamian that's got a bill named for them. He's not sure. He's supposed to be looking it up to let me know. But he also put me in the same category with Rosa Parks. He said, Rosa stood up for her seat, I stood up for equal rights. But I'd like to close with a little thought for you to leave you with. Clearly, fate had other plans for this Alabama girl. After all, I started out as a supervisor at a tire plant. 30 years later, I've been a litigant, an advocate, a lobbyist, an author, and a public speaker. Sometimes life throws us curveballs, and we may not expect them, and we may not want them, but we still have to deal with them. After everything that's happened to me, I've come to realize that the true test of a person is not so much what happens to us, but how we react to it. When we see an injustice, do we sit and do nothing, or do we fight back? When we experience failure, do we passively accept it, or do we learn from it and do better the next time? When we get knocked down, do we stay down, or do we get back up? Each of us, every day, breaks through barriers for women and girls simply because we choose to believe the future can be better. Thank you for having me. Thank you.